The sun had barely risen over the barren landscape, casting long shadows across the rocky terrain. The air was thick with the scent of dust, and the silence was broken only by the hum of the human soldiers' equipment. This was not a peaceful mission, nor a routine one. They had landed on the alien planet in search of answers, following a faint distress signal that had barely made it through the galaxy. What they didn't know was that this mission would change everything. Captain Jonathan Hayes led the group of soldiers as they carefully moved through the wreckage of what once was a thriving alien civilization. The planet was dying. Buildings were crumbling and vegetation was sparse. It seemed that whatever had caused the destruction had left only ruins in its wake. "Stay alert, everyone," Captain Hayes commanded, his voice steady. "We don't know what we're walking into." The soldiers nodded in agreement. They had trained for countless scenarios, but nothing could have prepared them for what lay ahead. The faint signal they had followed was their only lead to finding survivors, but as they moved deeper into the ruins, the truth became more uncertain. The planet seemed empty. Then, out of the corner of his eye, Jonathan noticed something. A faint movement, almost imperceptible, hidden behind a collapsed wall. He motioned to his team, and they stopped immediately, weapons raised and ready. "Who's there?" Jonathan called out, his voice carrying across the quiet landscape. There was a pause, and then a figure emerged from the shadows. A woman. Her skin was a pale shade of blue, and her eyes glowed faintly with an eerie light. She was fragile, barely able to stand, her clothes torn and blood-stained. But what truly struck Jonathan was the look in her eyes, desperation and fear, mixed with something else, something ancient. "Please," the woman whispered, her voice barely audible. "Help me." Jonathan's heart skipped a beat. He had seen the horrors of war, but this was something different. The woman before him was not like the other alien species they had encountered in the past. She looked human, almost. "Who are you?" Jonathan asked, his voice softer now, though the weight of his gun remained heavy in his hand. "I am the last of my people," the woman said, her words shaky but clear. "My name is Lyra. My clan, they are all gone. The ones who did this they killed everyone." The soldiers exchanged confused glances. This wasn't what they had expected. They had thought they were searching for some sort of military outpost or a hidden colony, not a lone survivor, barely clinging to life. "Who did this to you?" Jonathan asked, taking a cautious step forward. He lowered his weapon slightly, sensing that this was not an immediate threat. At least, not to him. "The invaders," Lyra replied, her voice trembling with emotion. "They came from the stars. They destroyed my people, my home, everything." She paused, her breath shallow as she tried to steady herself. "And now I am all that remains." Jonathan felt a pang of sympathy, but there was no time for pity. The mission was clear: secure the area and gather information. But as he looked at her, this fragile alien who spoke with such pain, something about her plea tugged at him. There was more to this than just a survival story. There was a deeper desperation in her voice, an urgency that Jonathan couldn't ignore. "What do you want from us?" Jonathan asked, his voice steady, though his mind raced. The soldier within him told him to be cautious, but the human side of him felt a strange connection to this woman, this last of her kind. Lyra's eyes locked onto his, and for a moment, Jonathan felt as if she were searching his soul. "I need you to save my clan. There's a chance, just a chance, that I can bring them back. But I need your help. Please," she pleaded. "You must save them. They are the only family I have left." Jonathan stepped back, trying to process what she had just said. Bring them back? Was this some kind of alien trickery? Or was it a desperate plea from a woman who had lost everything? He glanced at his team, but they were just as confused as he was. None of them had any answers. The silence stretched for what felt like an eternity. The only sound was the wind whispering through the ruins. You want us to help you revive your people? Jonathan asked, trying to make sense of the situation. It seemed impossible, even by the standards of the advanced alien technology they had studied. But then again, nothing about this mission had made sense from the beginning. Lyra nodded, her face pale and drawn. Yes, and in return, I will give you something no one else can offer. She paused, and her voice dropped to a near whisper. I will bear your children. Strong children. Children who will carry the legacy of my people. The words hung in the air like a thunderclap. Jonathan felt his heart race. Bear his children? What kind of bargain was this? It made no sense, yet Lyra's plea was so earnest, so desperate, that it sent a chill down his spine. He stood there, frozen, caught between his duty as a soldier and something else, something he couldn't quite explain. A voice in his head screamed to reject her offer, but another part of him, a part he wasn't ready to face, felt an undeniable pull. Why? Jonathan finally asked, his voice barely a whisper. Because, Lyra replied, her eyes shining. With unshed tears, it's the only way to save my people. It's the only way to ensure the survival of my clan. Jonathan's mind was racing. He had no idea what he had just agreed to, but one thing was certain. Nothing would ever be the same again. Jonathan couldn't shake the feeling of unease as Lyra's words echoed in his mind. I will bear your children. Strong children. Children who will carry the legacy of my people. It was insane. A bargain no sane person would ever make. And yet, here he was, standing before the last of a dying race, her plea so raw, so desperate, that it seemed impossible to ignore. He took a deep breath and shook his head, trying to clear his thoughts. He had been trained for countless situations, but this was something entirely new, something that transcended logic and reason. It wasn't just the words themselves, but the weight of the promise behind them. He had to understand why Lyra had asked for such an impossible exchange. You're telling me, Jonathan began slowly, that you want me to father children with you, to save your people? What exactly do you mean by strong children? Lyra's eyes locked onto his, and for a moment, Jonathan thought he could see a flicker of something beyond desperation, something almost calculating, but the moment was fleeting, and she spoke again, her voice steady but still edged with sorrow. The strength I speak of is not physical power, Captain, Lyra explained, her tone quiet but intense. It is the strength of a new generation, the strength that comes from the fusion of your species and mine. Your children will be the key to unlocking what remains of my people's power, to restoring what we have lost. They will carry both the resilience of humanity and the intelligence of my kind. Jonathan tried to wrap his mind around her words. New generation, fusion, unlocking power. He wasn't sure if she was speaking metaphorically or literally. But either way, it sounded too absurd to believe. The world around them was in ruins, and here was this alien woman asking him for the one thing he had always thought was reserved for love and commitment. But then he remembered why they had come here in the first place, to find survivors, to uncover what had happened to this lost civilization. Was it possible that this woman, this last alien, held the key to something greater than just survival? Something that could reshape the balance of power in the universe. Jonathan glanced at his team again. They had heard Lyra's words too, but none of them had the answers. They were soldiers, not philosophers. They followed orders, they didn't make life-altering decisions. I don't understand, Jonathan said, his voice strained. Why me? Why not one of your own kind? You said your people are gone. How? Can I? Lyra interrupted him, her gaze sharp now, as though she had been waiting for him to ask the question. Because humans are resilient, you survive where others fail. Your species has something my people lacked, adaptability. You've lived through wars, famine, and countless challenges. My people... We were too rigid, too proud. Our way of life became a prison. But you, humans, have the power to rebuild." Jonathan was stunned. He had heard stories of the alien species he had encountered during his missions, but none had ever spoken of humans this way. The admiration in Lyra's voice was palpable, and for the first time, he felt an overwhelming sense of responsibility. But that responsibility came with a terrifying cost. "Why do you need this fusion of our species?" Jonathan asked. "Is it just about survival, or is there something else?" Lyra's expression faltered for a brief moment, and Jonathan caught a glimpse of fear in her eyes, a fear that was deeper than just the loss of her people. "We were once a proud and powerful race," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But in the end, it was our downfall. We had technology beyond your understanding, but it was our arrogance that led to our destruction. Now the enemy that wiped out my people is coming for yours. If we do not unite, if we do not join forces, neither of our species will survive." Jonathan's mind raced as he processed her words. This wasn't just a matter of saving a single race. This was about the survival of humanity itself. The enemy she spoke of sounded like something out of a nightmare, something he wasn't ready to face. Yet, there was no denying the urgency in Lyra's plea. "Tell me more," Jonathan said, his voice now steady, his earlier doubts replaced by a strange sense of determination. "What kind of enemy are we facing?" Lyra hesitated for a moment, her eyes scanning the desolate landscape, as if she were searching for something far away. "They are not like us," she said softly. "They are an invasive species, relentless and merciless. They destroy everything in their path. They do not care for diplomacy nor mercy. They take what they want, and they leave nothing behind." Jonathan shivered. The idea of facing such an enemy was terrifying, but it also made something inside him stir. His mind flashed to the horrors he had seen in his military career: wars, invasions, planets torn apart by destruction. He had been part of the solution before, but this was different. This was personal. This was the survival of not just one species, but both. "You're asking me to make an impossible choice," Jonathan said, his voice heavy with the weight of the decision to save your people. "And in return, you want me to father children with you. Children who could carry the legacy of your species. It's not just a sacrifice. It's a responsibility." Lyra's eyes softened, and for a moment she seemed almost human, her vulnerability shining through the strength of her words. "Yes, Captain, it is a responsibility. But it is also a chance for redemption. A chance to rebuild what was lost. A chance to save us all." The air around them felt still, as if the entire planet was holding its breath, waiting for Jonathan to decide. He knew the path ahead wouldn't be easy. There was no turning back once he agreed. But the weight of the choice was undeniable. He could turn away and let everything end. Or he could take a chance on something that could change the fate of two worlds forever. And so, as the wind howled through the ruins, Jonathan made his choice. "I'll help you," he said quietly, "but we do this together. For both our people." Lyra nodded, her expression a mix of gratitude and something more, something that hinted at the beginning of a bond neither of them could fully understand yet. The first few hours after Jonathan's agreement felt like a lifetime. As night fell over the barren alien landscape, a strange silence enveloped the camp. The soldiers kept their distance, giving their captain the space he needed to process the magnitude of his decision. Jonathan, however, could not escape the gnawing feeling of uncertainty. Lyra's offer, her bargain, still haunted him. It seemed unreal. Could a human really father the children of an alien species? And could they truly carry the strength to rebuild an entire race? The concept was so far beyond anything he'd ever been trained for. His mission had been simple: find survivors, secure intelligence, and report back. Yet here he was, standing on the edge of a decision that could change the future of both human and alien kind. The stillness of the night was broken by a soft, melodic hum. Jonathan turned to see Lyra standing by a small, glowing device near their campfire. It was unlike any technology he had seen before, sleek and intricate, glowing with an ethereal light. It seemed to pulse with life, and Jonathan couldn't help but feel an odd sense of awe as he approached her. "Captain, there is much you do not understand," Lyra spoke, her voice calm yet filled with a sense of purpose. She gestured for him to come closer, and he did, curiosity compelling him. "The enemy we face, they are not just conquerors of worlds. They are destroyers of souls. They feed off destruction. They leave nothing behind." Jonathan frowned, his mind still trying to catch up. "What do you mean, feed off destruction?" he asked. "How is that possible?" Lyra's eyes darkened with memories too painful to speak. "They feed on the chaos they create, Captain. They use it to strengthen themselves. The more destruction they cause, the more powerful they become. They have no true understanding of life, only the hunger for more. For them, a world is just a stepping stone to their next conquest." She paused, and Jonathan could see the pain in her expression, the raw emotion that had driven her to seek his help in the first place. "My people, our civilization, was once capable of stopping them. We had technology, knowledge, weapons. That could have driven them back, but we lost it. We became so advanced that we forgot the most important thing, the balance between power and life." Jonathan stood in silence. He had heard stories of ancient civilizations and their grand technologies, but nothing like this. Lyra's words painted a picture of a species that had reached the pinnacle of power and then let it slip away due to their own arrogance. The concept of balance, something that humans often took for granted, was foreign to them, and it cost them everything. Lyra seemed to sense his confusion. "You still don't fully understand, do you? You are a soldier, Captain. You understand the value of strength, of fighting for survival. But strength is not just in weapons and technology. True strength comes from within, from the will to protect and preserve life, not just to destroy." She took a step back, her hand gently touching the glowing device in front of her. "This is a fragment of our ancient technology. It holds the key to defeating the invaders if it is activated in the right way, but the power it requires ... Lyra hesitated, her voice faltering for the first time. "It requires a fusion of our species. The very thing I've asked of you." Jonathan's heart raced. He hadn't fully grasped the significance of their bargain until now. This wasn't just about saving her people. It wasn't just about bearing children. It was about something far deeper, something intertwined with the very survival of both races. The fusion she spoke of wasn't just biological. It was the key to accessing the last remnants of her people's power. "You want me to help you activate this fusion?" Jonathan asked, his voice filled with disbelief. "You want us to combine our species in some way that will unlock your ancient power?" Lyra nodded solemnly. "Yes. Only through this fusion can we unlock the potential within our DNA and activate the ancient technologies that were once used to repel the invaders. But the process is not simple. It requires trust in one another's strength, in our ability to work together to overcome the odds. That is why I came to you. I believe you have the strength to do this." Jonathan felt a cold shiver run down his spine. He was a soldier. He had faced battles, enemies, and the unthinkable before. But this was different. This wasn't a battle with guns and bombs. This was a fight for something far greater, the survival of entire species, the very future of their worlds. For the first time, Jonathan realized the gravity of his decision. There was no turning back now. He wasn't just a soldier following orders anymore. He was a key player in an intergalactic struggle, one that would test every ounce of his strength and resolve. "Then show me," Jonathan said, his voice hardening with determination. Show me how we can stop them. I'm ready to fight, but I need to understand what I'm up against. Lyra's eyes softened, and she nodded. You will understand soon enough. But first, you must learn the true nature of the enemy we face. They are not invincible, Captain. We can defeat them, but only if we unlock the power that lies dormant within both our species. With that, she pressed a button on the glowing device, and the air around them seemed to hum with energy. The device activated, casting a soft, pulsing light across the landscape. As it did, a series of images flickered to life in the air before them, visions of ancient battles, of her people's rise and fall, and of the terrifying enemies that had come from the stars. Jonathan's breath caught in his throat as he watched the images unfold. This was no ordinary war. This was the story of a species pushed to the brink of extinction, and of the last hope to stop the unstoppable. He knew then that there was no going back. The battle had just begun. The next day, the air was thick with tension. The soldiers had been briefed about the mission, but their faces reflected the uncertainty that Jonathan himself felt. They were used to facing combat, to following orders without question. But what lay ahead was something different. A task that could alter the fate of two worlds, humanity's and the alien race that had come to him for help. As the team gathered near the glowing device that Lyra had activated, Jonathan noticed how the atmosphere had shifted. The usual camaraderie between the soldiers had given way to quiet whispers and uneasy glances. They didn't know what to make of it. They had trained for warfare, for survival. But this was something entirely new. Lyra stood by the device, her expression more focused than before. She seemed lost in thought, staring at the holographic images of her people's history that still lingered in the air. The weight of their shared responsibility hung heavy in the camp. Jonathan felt it too. The question that had been gnawing at him since their first encounter echoed in his mind again. Why me? He approached her cautiously, not wanting to interrupt her concentration, but needing answers. Lyra, Jonathan said, his voice softer than before, you've shown me the technology, the power within your people's DNA, but you've never explained why I'm the one who must make this choice. Why does it have to be me? Why not another soldier, or someone more equipped for this? He gestured to the device, still pulsing with energy, and to the bond she was asking him to forge. Lyra turned toward him slowly, her eyes searching his face as though weighing his every word. She stepped closer, closing the distance between them. Her presence imposing, yet strangely comforting. Because, Captain, you have something that they don't. She paused, her voice steady yet filled with an edge of vulnerability. You have the human spirit. The spirit of survival, of resilience, and the will to protect what matters most. My people were strong, yes, but we failed to understand what makes a species truly powerful. Unity, trust, love. Jonathan frowned, confused. But I'm not here to love you, Lyra. I'm here to save your people. I'm a soldier, not whatever this is. He could feel his heart beating faster. He knew there was more to her words, but it was difficult to grasp. Lyra's eyes softened, and for a moment, she seemed less like an alien and more like a woman burdened by the same fears and hopes that plagued humans. I'm not asking for love, Captain. I'm asking for something far more complicated and far more important. The process I've asked of you is not just a union of bodies. It is a union of purpose, of hope. It's not just about saving my clan. It's about saving both of our worlds. Jonathan stood there, absorbing her words. I don't understand. You said your people failed because they didn't understand unity. What makes you think humans will succeed where your kind failed? Lyra's gaze hardened, but there was something else there too, a spark of something far deeper than mere desperation. Because humans fight for something greater than survival. You fight for each other. You fight for family, for friends, for ideals. My people were too focused on preserving their legacy. They lost sight of what really mattered, connection. I believe your species can understand that better than anyone. Jonathan's mind was racing. He had always believed in the value of comradeship, of loyalty. But this was something else entirely. It was a gamble, a leap of faith that he didn't know if he was ready to take. He took a deep breath, trying to steady his thoughts. And what happens if I fail? What if this fusion doesn't work? What if I can't save your people? Lyra's expression faltered for a brief moment, a flicker of fear passing through her eyes. She knew the stakes as well as he did. Then everything we know, everything we are will be lost. The enemy will come, and they will finish what they started. But we still have time, Captain. The key lies within us, within the bond we must form. It's the only chance we have left. Jonathan stared at her, his heart pounding in his chest. The decision before him was overwhelming. He was a soldier, trained to face the enemy, to conquer impossible odds, but this wasn't a fight he had ever prepared for. It wasn't just about defeating an enemy, it was about understanding an entirely different form of strength that he knew there was no turning back. His decision would determine the fate of two worlds, two species. But what did Lyra mean by bond? Was it just the physical act she spoke of? Or was there something deeper, something that transcended biology? Something more profound than either of them could understand? Jonathan looked back at his soldiers who were watching him from a distance, unsure of how to move forward. He could feel their uncertainty, their hesitation. They trusted him, but they too were lost in the complexity of the situation. What if I can't do it? Jonathan asked again, his voice quieter this time, the weight of his uncertainty pressing down on him. Lyra stepped closer, her gaze unwavering. Then we will fail, but you will not fail, Captain. I believe in you. Her words sent a surge of something through Jonathan, something raw, something primal. He wasn't sure if it was hope or fear or something else entirely, but it pushed him forward. He didn't have all the answers, but in that moment, he understood one thing. He had a choice to make, and whatever happened next, it was up to him to decide. The cost of success would be high. The cost of failure would be even higher. But this was a fight he couldn't turn away from, not for himself, not for Lyra, and certainly not for the future of both their worlds. I'll do it, Jonathan said, his voice filled with resolve. But I need to know everything. Everything. About this process, about the power within you, about what I'm really agreeing to. Lyra nodded, a glimmer of relief flashing in her eyes. You'll have everything, Captain. But time is running out. The enemy is already on their way. As she spoke, the sound of distant engines echoed in the horizon, a reminder that the clock was ticking. There was no more time for doubt. Jonathan had made his choice. And now he would have to face the consequences. The quiet was the first thing Jonathan noticed. The wind had stopped, and the once barren landscape seemed to hold its breath. The air felt thicker now, heavy with anticipation. The sky above, usually a faint shade of purple, had darkened in, a way that unsettled him, casting long shadows over the camp. The distant hum of alien technology was the only sound breaking the eerie stillness. But even that seemed to be growing louder, a harbinger of something much darker. Jonathan stood on the edge of the camp, his eyes scanning the horizon. He had expected a battle, he had prepared for it, trained for it, but what lay ahead felt different. This wasn't just another fight for survival. This was the beginning of a war between species, a war that could change the course of history. For both humans and aliens. Captain, came Lyra's voice, soft but commanding. Jonathan turned to see her approaching, her expression filled with urgency. She had not said much since they had agreed to move forward, but the weight of her silence spoke volumes. They're coming. Jonathan didn't need any further explanation. He could feel it too, the presence of something out there. Something enormous, something that threatened everything. How much time do we have? He asked, his voice steady, though his mind was racing. He glanced at the soldiers who had formed a defensive perimeter around the camp. They were ready, but they had no idea what they were truly facing. And Jonathan wasn't sure he did, either. "Hours," Lyra replied, her tone grim. "Maybe less." The wind picked up again, but it felt different now, charged, as if the very atmosphere was bracing for the storm to come. Jonathan turned to his team, his soldiers who had stood by him through countless missions, and knew that the time for preparation had passed. The enemy was no longer a rumor, no longer something to fear from afar. They were here. Jonathan motioned for his team to assemble, and they gathered around him, their faces filled with tension. They had heard the stories, the warnings of an unstoppable force, but they had never seen it with their own eyes. None of them were prepared for the nightmare they were about to face. "We don't know exactly what we're up against," Jonathan began, his voice strong. "But Lyra and I have come up with a plan. We're going to hold the line as best we can and find a way to activate the technology we need. If we succeed, we may just have a chance." He could see the skepticism in their eyes. They had all fought in battles, but nothing had prepared them for the sheer scale of what was coming. Still, they trusted him. "They didn't have a choice. We fight together," Jonathan continued. "And no matter what happens, we don't stop until it's over, for humanity, for Lyra's people." Lyra stepped forward then, her eyes scanning the soldiers. "Your courage will be the key to our success," she said, her voice both soft and powerful. "But you must trust me. The technology I speak of is not simple. It is ancient, and it requires all of us, our minds, our hearts, and our strength. If we can activate it before they arrive, we stand a chance. But if we fail, everything will be lost." The soldiers nodded, their resolve hardening. They had faced impossible odds before, but this felt different. The weight of the unknown hung heavy in the air, and Jonathan could see that they all understood the gravity of the situation. As they took their positions, Jonathan couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. It wasn't just the alien technology that hummed in the background, it was something else, something far more sinister. The enemy was out there, just beyond the horizon, and they were closing in fast. The first sign came just after dusk. A faint glow appeared in the distance, a flickering light that seemed to pulse with a rhythm of its own. Jonathan squinted into the darkness, his hand instinctively reaching for his weapon, but he knew that this was no ordinary light. It wasn't the glow of a campfire or a distant city. It was something far more unnatural. "They're here," Lyra whispered, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and determination. "They've arrived." Suddenly, the ground trembled beneath their feet, and Jonathan felt the vibration deep in his bones. It wasn't just an earthquake or a shift in the planet's tectonic plates. It was the arrival of something massive, something that could bring this entire planet to its knees. From the distance, a rumble like thunder began to grow louder. Then, as if the night itself had come alive, the first of the invaders appeared, massive figures emerging from the dark horizon, their silhouettes outlined by the strange flickering light. They were unlike anything Jonathan had ever seen, huge, armored creatures, their bodies covered in blackened metallic plating that reflected the eerie glow of the planet's dying star. Lyra's voice broke through the shock of seeing the enemy for the first time. "The Zothar, they are here." Jonathan's heart skipped a beat. The Zothar, the destroyers of worlds. The monsters that Lyra had spoken of, the ones who had wiped out her people. Now they had come for humanity. The first wave of Zothar warriors charged forward, their movements swift and fluid, despite their size. The ground beneath their feet seemed to shake with each step they took, as if the very earth was terrified of their approach. Jonathan's soldiers opened fire, but the shots barely seemed to slow them down. The Zothar were like living tanks, their armor impenetrable, their strength unmatched. "Fall back," Jonathan shouted, his voice cutting through the chaos. "Get to the device. We need to activate it now." The soldiers obeyed without question, retreating toward the glowing device that was their last hope. But even as they moved, Jonathan could feel the weight of the enemy closing in. There was no time to waste. The Zothar were relentless, and if they didn't act quickly, everything would be over. Lyra stood beside Jonathan as the battle raged on, her face a mask of determination. "It's time, Captain," she said, her voice steady despite the chaos around them. "We must activate the technology now, or we lose everything." Jonathan nodded, his hand tightening around his weapon. He knew what needed to be done. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and out of time. But if they could unlock the power within Lyra's people's ancient technology, they might just have a chance. The Zothar were here, and Jonathan knew that the fight for survival had just begun. The air was thick with the smell of smoke and burning debris, the night sky now lit by flashes of laser fire and the distant rumble of explosions. The battle had begun in full force, but it was a war that Jonathan knew they couldn't win through sheer firepower alone. The Zothar were too strong, their weapons too advanced, and their relentless charge made it clear this was no ordinary fight. This was the fight for the future of two species. Jonathan's eyes scanned the battlefield as his soldiers fought desperately to hold their ground. Every corner of the camp was under attack, with Zothar warriors emerging from the shadows like giants. The human soldiers fired relentlessly, but it was like trying to stop a tidal wave with a pebble. Their enemy's armor was nearly impenetrable, and their technology was far beyond anything the humans had encountered. "Captain!" A soldier's shout pierced through the chaos. Jonathan turned to see one of his men, injured but still standing, waving frantically for attention. "We're running out of ammo. We can't hold them off for much longer." The weight of the situation pressed heavily on Jonathan. His soldiers were running low on supplies, and the Zothar were relentless in their pursuit. But there was one thing Jonathan could still rely on, the alien technology that Lyra had shown him. It was their only hope, if they could activate it in time. "Get to the device," Jonathan ordered, his voice hoarse with urgency. "We have to make it work now, no matter what." The soldiers nodded and began retreating toward the glowing core in the center of the camp, the one piece of alien technology that could turn the tide of the battle. But as they moved, Jonathan felt the ground tremble again. The Zothar were closing in, faster than ever. He turned to Lyra, who was standing beside the device, her face pale but determined. She had not moved since the battle began, her eyes fixed on the device that could save them all. But even she looked uncertain now, her grip tightening around the controls. The air around them was thick with tension. "It's not ready yet," Lyra said, her voice strained. "The fusion requires more energy than I anticipated. It's taking longer than I thought to activate." Jonathan's heart pounded in his chest. He had no more time to waste. "We don't have time for more delays. If we don't get this thing online right now, we won't make it out alive." Lyra's gaze met his, and for the first time since he had met her, he saw something other than the cool composure of an alien leader, something vulnerable. "I know," she whispered, "but there's a cost. The technology requires a sacrifice. I didn't want to tell you, but I can't hide it any longer. For the device to activate fully, one of us must give everything, our life force, our energy. Without that sacrifice, it won't work. It's the only way." Jonathan felt the air around him go cold as he processed her words. "You're saying someone has to die?" Lyra nodded slowly, her eyes filled with regret. "Yes, I didn't want to burden you with this. But the power required to activate the device is immense, and it can only be unlocked through a life given willingly. It's the price of survival." Jonathan's mind raced. He had heard of ancient technologies requiring sacrifices, but this was beyond anything he could have imagined. He looked around at the soldiers, all of them fighting and dying for a cause they couldn't fully comprehend. The weight of his responsibility had never been heavier. "I'll do it," Lyra said, stepping forward as if reading his thoughts. I knew this day might come. I've lived with the knowledge that I might be the one to make this sacrifice. My people are gone, Captain, but you still have a chance. I will give everything so that humanity and my race can survive. Jonathan's breath caught in his throat. No, I can't let you do this. You're the last of your kind. Without you, your people are truly gone. Lyra shook her head, a faint smile on her lips despite the grimness of the situation. You're wrong. Captain, my people may have fallen, but they are not truly gone. Their legacy is still alive in you, in the children you will have, in the strength you possess. I've lived my life. Now I give it willingly for the future of both our species. Jonathan stepped forward, his heart heavy with the weight of the decision. He could see in her eyes the finality of her words. Lyra was ready to make the ultimate sacrifice, not for power, not for revenge, but for the survival of all that was left of her people. Don't make this decision alone, Jonathan said, his voice firm. Let me help you. I'll do it. I'll make the sacrifice. But Lyra stepped back, her hand gently resting on the device's control panel. No, Captain. This is my burden to bear. You have your future. You have the strength of humanity, the power to rebuild. Let me be the one to give everything so that you may live. Jonathan's mind was reeling. He had faced death countless times, but this was something he had never expected, having to choose who would live and who would die. Not in battle, but in the name of survival. And yet, there was no choice to be made. Lyra's selflessness in the face of certain death was a reminder of the greater cause they were fighting for. She wasn't just giving her life, she was giving humanity a future. I won't let you do this alone, Jonathan said, his voice resolute. He stepped toward her, not knowing what exactly he could do, but knowing he had to be with her in this moment. The weight of the decision was too much for one person to carry alone. Lyra looked at him, and for a fleeting moment, there was a sadness in her eyes. But then she nodded, her hand resting on the device once again. Then we'll do it. Together, but remember, Captain, this is the only way. The fusion requires both our energy, the key lies in our unity. Jonathan took a deep breath, knowing that this moment would shape the future of two worlds. Together, they stood side by side, ready to make the ultimate sacrifice to save everything they held dear. The air around them hummed with energy as the device flickered to life, and the final irreversible choice was made. The battle outside raged on, but Jonathan knew that what happened next would be the true test of their strength, their unity, and their will to survive. And in that moment, he was ready to face whatever came next together with Lyra. The ground trembled once more, but this time, it wasn't from the footsteps of the enemy. The energy from the device had reached its peak, and the entire planet seemed to pulse with life. The air around Jonathan and Lyra crackled with the raw power that they had unlocked together. It was as if the very core of the planet had awakened, responding to the surge of energy they had released. Jonathan's heart was pounding in his chest, his hand still resting on the glowing device. Beside him, Lyra stood with her eyes closed, her face serene yet filled with a quiet strength. The sacrifice had been made. The life force she had given had merged with his, the fusion complete. He could feel it now, the power of both their species coursing through him, intertwining their destinies in ways he could never have imagined. The Zothar, once so formidable, had slowed their relentless assault. The vibrations in the ground were no longer the tremors of an enemy advancing, but the tremors of something ancient, something more powerful than any of them had expected. The device's energy had begun to manifest in ways Jonathan couldn't comprehend, creating ripples of light across the battlefield. It was like the air itself had become alive. And then it happened. A brilliant flash of light exploded from the device, blinding everyone for a moment. The soldiers, the Zothar, and even Lyra herself were caught in the intensity of the light, their eyes unable to comprehend what was happening. When the light faded, the scene before them had changed. The Zothar had frozen, their movements sluggish, as if the energy released by the device had somehow weakened them. Their once unstoppable force had faltered. Jonathan's breath caught in his throat. "It's working," he whispered, disbelief lacing his words. The battle that had seemed lost just moments ago was now shifting in their favor. The device had done what they could never have accomplished through force alone. Lyra's voice was soft, but full of power. "We've awakened something within them. The Zothar are no longer able to feed off destruction as they did before. The energy that once powered them is now fading. They are vulnerable." Jonathan didn't waste another second. "Attack!" he shouted. The soldiers, now emboldened by the sudden change in the tide, rushed forward, their weapons now effective against the weakened Zothar. The battle had turned, the tide had shifted. But there was something else, something Jonathan couldn't shake. He looked down at Lyra, who was still standing beside him, her eyes fixed on the battlefield. The fusion had changed him. He could feel the pulse of her people within him, the strength of both humanity and the alien race coursing through his veins. It was a power unlike anything he had ever known. "Is this it?" Jonathan asked quietly. "Is this the beginning of the end, or the beginning of something else?" Lyra turned to him, her face filled with a calm wisdom that Jonathan had come to respect. "This is not the end, Captain. This is only the beginning. Your people will rebuild. My people will live on through you, through the children that will come. The fusion we've achieved is more than just survival. It's the start of a new Chapter 1, where we will not fight for survival alone, but for the unity of two worlds." Jonathan looked around at the soldiers, now taking control of the battlefield, and then back at Lyra. He could see it now, the glimmer of hope in their eyes. The war was far from over, but they had won this battle. And with the power they had unlocked, they would continue to fight, not just for survival, but for a future that was no longer divided by species, by race, or by past mistakes. The Zothar, though still strong, were retreating. The energy from the device had not just disrupted their power, it had broken the hold they had on this planet. The Zothar were no longer the unstoppable force they once were. They were weakened, vulnerable, and in disarray. But the real victory was not just in the physical battle. It was in the connection between them, between Jonathan and Lyra, and the combined forces of humanity and the last remnants of her people. The bond they had formed was now a symbol of something much greater than either of them could have understood before. It was the beginning of a new era. The Zothar would retreat, but they would not be forgotten. The universe was vast, and the struggle for survival would continue. But now Jonathan and Lyra knew that there was more at stake than just the survival of their people. They were fighting for unity, for the future of all species, and for a shared legacy that transcended their differences. "Together," Lyra said softly, her voice carrying a weight that Jonathan would never forget, "we are stronger than anything that comes our way." Jonathan nodded, his gaze sweeping over the battlefield. The fight was far from over, but he was no longer alone. Lyra's people were with him, and humanity's will to survive had been proven stronger than ever before. The Zothar may have been defeated for now, but a new world had been born from the ashes of war. And with it, a new beginning. Jonathan turned his gaze to the horizon, his mind racing with the possibilities of the future. The journey ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear. Together, they could overcome anything. Together, they would rebuild, stronger than ever before. And as the first light of dawn broke over the horizon, Jonathan knew that this was only the beginning.